Back in the day when I used to study at university, I had to get a part-time job to support my fees, as many of us will have had to have done. And so what I did was that I worked as a fossil fuel transfusions engineer, which means that I pumped gas. And I was pumping gas at a local petrol station in the evening shift. And on one particular day, a young man pulled in with his car. He had some mates in the back. He might have been, 17, 18 years old, Māori guy, filled up his petrol tank with gas and drove off. And my colleague and I were looking at each other, kind of asking the question, did he actually pay or not? And we weren't sure. And so my mate says, quickly grab his number plate number, so we can, check up with the police if we need to. And so I quickly got out my pad and looked up the road and saw the car and checked out the number plate and wrote it down. And the guy must have seen me. The guy driving away in the car must have somehow, or perhaps his friends did, saw me checking his number plate, looking intently at his car. And I saw the car stop and turn around and come back into the forecourt of the station. And he pulled up beside me and he rolled down his window and he said to me, "Does there appear to be some problem somewhere?" And I remember that little conversation because he didn't have to do that. He was a young guy. He could have just said, "Look, I'm just going to roll on. We're going forwards. It's going to be a hassle to turn around." But he saw ahead a few steps and he realized something was wrong here. And maybe something needed to be sorted out proactively to avoid further problems. Now, as it turned out, he had paid his money already, but he was wise enough to just make sure everything was covered off to avoid a problem that might happen in the future. And I remember thinking, what a wise young man. What a wise young man he was. And that's kind of what the book of Proverbs is all about. It's about the word wisdom. It's how we handle life's problems, how we navigate through life really, really well. How do we deal with difficult situations or difficult people? And maybe at times the difficult people are us. How do we handle our emotions and those sort of questions as well? The answer the Bible gives is the word wisdom. But wisdom in the Bible is not IQ. It's not intelligence. It's not know-how or smarts. It is more than that. It is rather a skill in living. It's skill in living. And so the Bible actually has a section within it of books which are grouped together called wisdom literature. And they all deal with this topic of how we do life well, what is worth striving for in life, those big questions of doing life to the best that we can. Those are the questions those books ask and partly answer. The book of Job and the book of Proverbs, the book of Ecclesiastes. How do you foolproof your life? And Proverbs really is one of the most wisdomy of these wisdom books. And it defines wisdom really well. At one point, the writer describes 4 animals. Now, these animals don't really have much intellect, right? This is what he says. 4 things on earth are small. This is Proverbs 30, 24 to 28. 4 things on earth are small, yet they are extremely wise. Ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up their food in the summer. Hyraxes are creatures of little power, yet they make their home in the crags. Locusts have no king, and yet they advance together in ranks. A lizard can be caught with a hand, and yet it is found in kings' palaces. So these 4 creatures that the writer is focusing our attention on are not Einsteins, right? They can't do Sudoku. Throw them a wordle or two and they wouldn't know what to do with it. And yet they have remarkable skill in living. And that is why the author draws them to our attention and says, take note, because wisdom is about living well. Now, the book of Proverbs, as I say, is a very wisdomy book which asks this question, and it is a book of Proverbs. And so what are Proverbs? Well, every culture has them. We call them, in Western culture, proverbs or sayings. Māori know them as whakatauki. Other cultures call them by different names. We all use them often without even thinking about them, you know. Strike while the iron's hot. Don't judge a book by its cover. They're potent little sound bites. They're poetic little compact morsels of wisdom and truth that generally are accepted as being true. They transmit wisdom. But have you ever wondered why they contradict each other so much? You know, you put two proverbs side by side and they often kind of cancel each other out. Consider these two. Fortune favors the brave. And yet put that side by side with fools rush in where angels fear to tread. One proverb saying, be bold, take steps. The other one saying, don't be overly bold, don't take steps. And a lot of proverbs actually contradict each other. Have you ever read this doozy of a verse in Proverbs, chapter 26, verse 4 to 5? Do not answer a fool according to his folly, or you yourself will be just like him. And then it says, answer a fool according to his folly, or he will be wise in his own eyes. Completely contradictory messages. Okay, so if you go to a person waiting outside the schoolyard, maybe a mum of a child, and she's just being silly, what it's saying is you have to read the situation. Is she teachable? If she is, then correct her. But if she's not, then she is just going to drag you into a stupid, foolish argument, right? And so Proverbs are contextual things. They are not universal truths to be applied in every situation, in every way. They are contextual. Their power depends on having the right proverb set into the right situation, often in the right way. Okay? The wisdom is knowing how and when to use them. And even the book of Proverbs says this. Chapter 15, verse 23. A person finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word. But a little while later it says, like the useless legs of one who is lame is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. Like a thorn bush in a drunkard's hand is a proverb in the mouth of a fool. So people just spouting these things off foolishly, they'll cause more damage. So who are the Proverbs written for? Well, if we go right back to the very start of the book, we have an introduction which looks at the scope of the Proverbs. Verse 1 of chapter 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, for gaining wisdom and instruction, for understanding words of insight, for receiving instruction in prudent behavior, doing what is right and just and fair, for giving prudence to those who are simple, knowledge and discretion to the young. And let the wise listen and add to their learning, and let the discerning get guidance. For understanding proverbs and parables, the sayings and riddles of the wise. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. So this introduction sets the tone of Proverbs in different ways. Firstly, it tells us who it's for, what kind of person it's for, and who it's not for. And so it introduces three different kinds of person. Firstly are the simple. And the simple here does not mean stupid. It doesn't mean, bankrupt in the brain department. Not at all. It simply means someone who is inexperienced, or naive, or young, or unformed. For them, Proverbs and wisdom will give knowledge and discretion. Secondly, we have the group of people who are called the wise. And they are the people who are already in possession of wisdom and knowledge and experience, but they are wanting more. They want to add to their knowledge or find new guidance. And for them, the Proverbs will give further guidance. But there is also a third kind of a person here, someone mentioned, who will figure a lot in the book of Proverbs, and that is a class of person called the fool, the foolish. And in Proverbs, the fool is not someone who, again, is mentally deficient. Nope, they can be very, very intelligent, in fact. Instead, it is someone who rejects God and or his instruction. For this kind of person, Proverbs will have no help for them at all. Because ultimately, as that last line says, wisdom is sourced from God. But the first 9 chapters of Proverbs, so that gives the overview of the scope of who Proverbs are for and not for. But the first 9 chapters of Proverbs are actually written to a certain specific person. It was the writings of a father to his son. In 2012, the adventurer Bear Grylls published a book called To My Sons, Lessons for the Wild Adventure called Life. And he introduces this book by saying this: To my sons, the great joy in my life. This little book is a culmination of all that I've learned about the game of life. I have learned these simple truths through many mistakes and many falls. I have learned them from watching and being around those I love and admire. And I have learned them through the hard times that life sometimes throws at us. I have learned that what I value most is found close at home, just being with you 3 boys and your mama. I hope these simple truths will help you blossom in the game of life. And I hope they will help you follow your hearts and your many dreams. I hope they will remind you to cherish those close to you and to live boldly and with a smile. You are the most wonderful joy in both our lives, and I could never have imagined such good fortune to be able to hold you so close to me so often, although it never seems enough. I adore you and am oh so proud of you. You are the best. With love, Papa. And so that is doing what the first 9 chapters of Proverbs were doing. It is the instruction of a dad to his older son, describing how to live life well and to avoid its pitfalls and to seek the right things and those sort of things. And so if you ever wonder why there's so much talk about adultery or being faithful sexually and all those sort of things in the first 9 chapters of Proverbs, that is why. It is because it's a dad talking to his son, an older son, about the things that he needs to know. And so verse 8 of chapter 1, listen, my son, to your father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. Chapter 3, verse 1, my son, do not forget my teaching. Keep my commands in your heart. A few verses later, my son, do not despise the Lord's discipline. Do not resent his rebuke. All this stuff where the dad is passing on wisdom to his boy. After that, after the first 9 chapters, there are a collection of other proverbs, more of a kind of scattergun approach in some ways. And really, Proverbs is a collection of collections. And they're all sort of gathered together. But the book as a whole has 1 key image and 2 key women in it. Firstly, the image. In Proverbs, there is an image that weaves its way through the whole book, and that is the image of a path, or a road, or a way, and it's describing life as being like a path, a journey that we take. He describes at one point in chapter 2, verse 13, those who have left the straight paths to walk in dark ways. They delight in doing wrong and rejoice in the perverseness of evil. Those whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So life is like a path. It has a start, it has a destination, it has a journey, and along the road you might come to forks in the road where you have to make a decision. Do you go this way or do you go this way? Do you choose the way of light or the way of dark or the way of straightness or the way of crookedness and those sorts of things? But there are also along the way other things. There are snares, there are pitfalls, there are even people who are out to ambush you along the road. What will you do? Will you avoid the dangers? Will you choose the right path? Will you make the right call? Those are the questions that Proverbs brings to us. But alongside that overriding image, there are also two women who are very interested in the decisions that you will make along the journey of life. And we find them in the first 9 chapters as well. The first one is called Woman Wisdom. The woman called Wisdom. And she is remarkable. She is an incredible woman. Was involved in creation of the world. She's bold, she's outgoing, she's confident, she goes out into the streets of the world and makes friends with people. She is engaging, she loves people, and she wants the best for everyone she meets. In chapter 9, this is how she's described in verse 1 and following. Wisdom has built her house. She has set up its 7 pillars. She has prepared her meat and mixed her wine. She has also set her table. She has sent out her servants, and she calls from the highest point of the city, "Let all who are simple come to my house. To all those who have no sense," she says, "Come, eat my food, drink my wine I have mixed. Leave your simple ways, and you will live. Walk in the way of insight." Pretty cool stuff. But further on, we meet another woman. And this woman is called folly, foolishness. The writer doesn't really spend a lot of time talking about her, but this is what he says about her in verse 13. Folly is an unruly woman. She is simple and knows nothing. She sits at the door of her house on a seat at the highest point of the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight on their way. "Let all who are simple come to my house." To those who have no sense, she says, "Stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious." But little do they know that the dead are in there, that her guests are deep in the realm of the dead. Two very different women. But did you get the similarities between the two? Firstly, they are both set up in the highest point of the city. That's where their cry rings forth. And if you know anything about cities in the ancient world, when this was written, the highest building in every single city was always the temple, whether it be to God or to pretender gods. Okay? So here we have a voice ringing out in the place of the temple. Secondly, they both call out using exactly the same phrase. Did you pick that up? They are calling the simple, those who are unformed or naive perhaps, come to me. So it's an invitation to relationship. And we understand that because in the ancient Near Eastern cultures, meals, sitting down with someone for a meal, was a sign of tight, intimate friendship, relationship. So here we have an invitation to close relationship, echoing out from the highest point of the city where the God building was. What does it tell us? They're not really real women, aren't they? What they are is personifications, if you like, of God or his pretenders. Wisdom, the woman wisdom, is an aspect of God himself, part of his character. And it's so cool that a woman is used to describe that, because God, of course, is beyond gender. Whereabouts is Jesus in all of this? Well, Jesus himself was very, very clear that he is found throughout the Old Testament. Do you remember the part where he's walking along with those guys going to Emmaus after the resurrection? And he opens up the scriptures, our Old Testament, to them, and he points out all the places where the prophets and the wisdom and the teachers pointed to him. So the Old Testament is saturated with pointers and the presence of Jesus is Jesus' own testimony. Pretty cool. There's also an uncanny resemblance between the creator Jesus that Paul speaks about in Colossians 1 and the creating agent of wisdom, which we find in Proverbs. Colossians 1:15, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. In him all things were created. Proverbs 8:23, I was formed long ages ago, at the very beginning when the world came to be. There's close parallels there. And in fact, there's even a bigger hint that Jesus himself identifies with woman wisdom. You know the story in Matthew 11, where the Pharisees have been accusing Jesus of being too loose in the way he lived life? They said, John the Baptist, he was pretty straight up and down, but you just party all the time. And Jesus says in verse 18 this fascinating thing. He says, John came neither eating or drinking, and they say, he has a demon. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here is a glutton and a drunkard, a friend of tax collectors and sinners, hanging out with all the wrong people. But then he says at the end, but wisdom is proved right by her deeds, by her actions. And this is a very strong link there, a very strong allusion to woman wisdom. He is identifying his actions as being the actions of woman wisdom. And so, yes, I think Jesus is through the book of Proverbs in powerful ways. So, that's an overview to the book of Proverbs. It is a book that brings us questions. What path will you take in life? What invitation will you respond to? What relationship will you pursue? Will you seek wisdom? This is the book that the book of Proverbs, this is the questions that the book of Proverbs will bring to us over the coming days as we start looking at some of these Proverbs in depth. And remember, the book itself says this is a life and death issue. This is a question that is life and death, because choose wrong and the house where you will end up is full of dead things. So, with that lovely image in mind, we will pray, and over the coming weeks we'll dive some more into this book. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for the wonderful aspect of your character called wisdom. Thank you that you desire us to be wise in your ways too. You are profoundly interested in the path that we take in life, and you want the best for us. And so, Lord, over the coming weeks, may we learn well, may we sit at your feet and be those who are no longer simple, but those who are growing in the wisdom of God in Christ Jesus. Amen. Bless you, and we'll catch up soon. Bye for now.